This week we're going to start to talk about virtues related to external goods. Aristotle and St. Thomas are going to move us from the examination of the virtues related to control of our internal appetites, rightly ordering us to the parts that generate voluntary activity and moral choice, to external goods, enabling means that assist in the performance of acts of virtues, so that by examining these external goods, they can eventually proceed to examine the external goods of justice and friendship. Because in order to behave towards friends and to act justly, what we have to do is to execute good toward these people and avoid doing things, external actions, and using external enabling means that somehow harm them. Okay, so St. Thomas starts lesson 1 of book 4 by remarking that having finished studying fortitude and temperance, virtues that consider means for preserving human life, Aristotle next starts to examine the virtues and means of lesser goods, enabling means, external goods, which are instrumental goods. He calls them coercive goods because you're required to use them even though they're not the chief subjects of desire, so as to enable you to be assisted in performing human actions. The chief external goods that Aristotle examines are riches and honors, rewards, and recall that as Aristotle sees it, first catches the attention of us as moral agents is that we see people rewarded and punished, praised and blamed for acts that they perform. So it's crucial to examine these materials, these elements of honors and rewards of riches, for example, which he considers all material goods, more or less, that in some way are enabling means for improving human well-being. Aristotle starts with riches because of a likeness between liberality and temperance. Liberality, we might call that today generosity. On a grand scale, it would be perhaps philanthropy. St. Thomas remarks that just as temperance moderates the desires of getting or having tactile pleasures, liberality moderates the desire for obtaining, having wealth, the tool for obtaining tools. So wealth is both the tools for obtaining the tools and the tools that you get through the acquisition. Liberality chiefly involves being able to handle well possession of wealth. You might have had this experience in life, observing people who all of a sudden go from rags to riches, and how difficult it is for people, especially young people, to handle that. It gives to a person the quality of being able to give and take wealth well. Aristotle says its proximate matter is love of wealth, love of getting wealth, he should say, and its remote matter is the love of wealth. Should say the love of having wealth. So the difference between them is the proximate matter is the love of getting wealth. The remote matter is the love of having wealth. The vices related to liberality are extravagance, spending like a glutton or a drunken sailor, as we might say today, and miserliness, being stingy or tight-fisted, hoarding, being cheap. These are terms we use to describe such people today. By wealth, Aristotle understands loosely anything we can measure in terms of exchangeability, a useful good, anything that can be put to use as an enabling means for perfecting the exercise of human faculties, especially those that preserve life and tend to enhance it. Comparing the spendthrift and the intemperate person, Aristotle considers the wasteful, squanderers, and people who are prodigal. He says that wealth is a tool, and that's why it's kind of coercive. It's something you can't avoid having, but it's not sought chiefly for itself. This is why it can't consist in happiness. Happiness can't consist in possessing wealth. The virtue of liberality consists in prudent use of wealth. The act of this virtue chiefly consists in making disbursements. The virtue, it will, he says, enhance courage as well as temperance. Its vice consists in inordinate waste and consumption. Liberality differs from saving, being a good saver. A person who's liberal is a good spender. A person who's the opposite of this, in a way, is a good saver. It's a kind of preservation, habitual retention of wealth, knowing how not to lose it, being able to accept it rightly, wealth that in such a way that you generate retention. You're good at taking and being able to grow the wealth and preserve it. From what he says, Aristotle concludes that a liberal person tends more to distribute wealth to the right people than to take it from the right sources and refuse it from the wrong sources. The liberal persons, the liberal spender's person is more difficult this quality is more difficult to possess and more virtuous than saving, even though you can't be liberal if you can't save. In other words, you can't be a liberal giver unless you first know how to save and invest. More characteristic of the liberal person, the extravagant person, is to be good, is to do good than to avoid evil, to give rather than to receive well. The liberal person is especially loved, Aristotle notes, by a useful, not an honorable friendship. Note how he starts to relate this external good to the act of friendship, which as an intermediary and as an essential circumstance for exercising friendship, a necessary condition, he has to consider. So everything he's doing with a meticulous order and arrangement, so he can chiefly get to the end of his interest in happiness and relating it to an act that is generated by friendship. In lesson 2 of book 4, St. Thomas and Aristotle examine the act of liberality, regarding the chief qualities of liberal giving. And once again, this is something good for people who are interested in philanthropy to study, as the first beginnings of it in small matters. Aristotle says that The first quality is that the giving fulfill all the properties of prudence. Second, to experience pleasure in giving, or at least no sadness, if with some sadness, with less than that which other people suffer. Notice how he once again talks about the fact that virtuous activity necessarily, essentially involves prudence and pleasure. Qualities of giving, the liberal person avoids are imprudent giving by excess and defect, and of course, not giving with pleasure, even though he doesn't directly mention that here. The secondary act of the liberal person is to receive prudently. Don't quickly ask for help. To be cautious in people that you consider to be donors to whatever activity you might be interested in giving to. First, he says you take from your own resources as a liberal person. You save and invest well, and you restrain from wrong giving. The four properties of liberalities, he says, are to give eagerly, generously, prudently, to give proportionately according to one's means, and not too much or too little. And he says another property is that people who inherit wealth and earn wealth incline to be spendthrifts and to protect their wealth like children. He appears to be under the influence of Plato here, if you remember the discussion in Book 1 of Plato's Republic with Cephalus and how he acquired his wealth. Socrates notes these qualities in people who are liberal givers. The liberal person is not easily made rich, he says, because of the fact that the person inclines to spend. The liberal man tends not to become rich, not because of imprudent giving, but because doing so does not befit the character of such a person. The habits, the virtues, as they are fixed in the person's soul, psyche. In lesson 3, St. Thomas takes up, and Aristotle take up extravagance, illiberality. Although today we would tend to think of extravagance as going beyond liberality. St. Thomas here more or less thinks that it is often identified. Because opposites are mutually revealing, St. Thomas says, Aristotle starts his examination of the spendthrift by contrasting the prudent giving of the liberal person, who some of us would call extravagant, and chiefly in the secondary acts and properties, to the opposite, imprudent giving of the spendthrift, the person who's extravagant, spends like a drunken sailor, and the miser. The gravity of, in lesson 4, Aristotle doesn't talk too much about this, the vice, because he doesn't talk that much, and I don't go into it because to me it's self-explanatory. And understanding what the liberal giver is, you understand the excesses by extreme and defect of the vice. In lesson 4, St. Thomas talks about the gravity of the vice of the spendthrift compared to the gravity of the vice of the miser. Regarding whether being a miser or a spendthrift is a worse vice, St. Thomas says that for 3 reasons, miserliness is a more serious fault. First, because spendthrifts quickly exhaust their resources like fools. They tend to run out of money. As a result, the ensuing poverty or getting older tend to cure the vice. Second, the spendthrift closely resembles the liberal man. that is, as I said, the extravagant person. Sometimes we use these terms synonymously. And can be more easily educated to prudent spending than can the miser. This vice arises more from ignorance than it does from having a vicious appetite. The spendthrift helps many people in addition. The miser hurts everyone, even himself, and has the disposition, the inclination more of being a thief. St. Thomas says imprudent givers tend to be imprudent takers. As a result, they incline to become intemperate. They tend to exhaust their resources, and very often this is the kind of person who would be inclined to go to a loan shark, or to max out a credit card with exorbitant interest. They incline to give out of a love of giving. They tend not to care how they get what they give as a result, and so they can get into trouble. They tend to enrich bad people as a result, and to impoverish good people. In a way, this vice of liberality, as the opposite of extravagance, while extravagance tends to be curable, the being a miser, being illiberal in giving, is something that Aristotle considers to be incurable, and St. Thomas talks about in Lesson 5. Aristotle gives two reasons why being a miser is an incurable vice, tends to be. First, he says human life tends to be beset with bodily defects and disabilities and weaknesses that incline people to seek to possess external enabling means, things to compensate for their personal weaknesses and poverty. People who have a good sense, a good estimation. This is one of the reasons why the estimative sense is important to be aware of. Don't tend to go to this kind of excess, but misers, they tend to not to realize properly their strengths and weaknesses. Because riches help to preserve life by nature, all human beings incline to want to possess riches, to be takers, not givers. Generosity and miserliness involve opposing actions, giving and receiving or taking. Many species of both of these exist, so many kinds of stinginess exist, of taking too much and giving too little. Not both of these vices exist in the same person. Some have one vice, some people, others have the other. Aristotle identifies the following people as deficient givers, as cheap. Those who spend little, hoard everything, who are tight-fisted, who give nothing, and take nothing. They neither a borrower nor a lender want to be. Next, he explains the psychology of the tight-fisted person, that some people might find interesting if you happen to have close association with such people. If they give what they have, he says, someday they think they might need it, and they might have to shame themselves by begging to get what they need. They tend to think that taking anything from someone else is shameful, and they shy away from taking something because they might someday be obligated to give something in return. Another way of being cheap consists in taking unjustly, being a thief, taking it secretively, being sneaky, taking through especially shameful professions. This will be one of the things that will happen to such a person. That the person will become a pimp. And Aristotle gives some of these examples. A grave robber, St. Thomas does, a gambler, Today a drug dealer, say, someone who plunders, or a loan shark. Other examples could be people who engage in bribery, blackmail, and extortion. Such people are called by disgraceful names, as is indicative of the names I just used. All such cases involve people who want to enrich themselves by impoverishing others. Notice, once again, the study of opposition, how for Aristotle, for the ancient Greeks, the whole of philosophy is a study of opposites, a study of the one and the many. Being cheap is a greater vice than being a spendthrift for two reasons. It's more difficult to cure, and men commit worse vices, more shameful acts because of it. The lesson 6 of part 1 starts to talk about magnificence, liberality on a grand scale, being a doer of great deeds, a giver of great gifts. After this virtue of liberality, St. Thomas talks about a virtue concerned with the use of wealth, magnificence. And notice once again how all of these virtues are dealing with intensive quantities, kind of greatness, qualitative greatness. He contrasts it with liberality, saying that liberality concerns giving and taking regarding all money matters, all wealth matters, not just money matters. And magnificence concerns only giving, great expenditures related to subjects worthy of great expenditures. This is more properly what today we call philanthropy. Once again, this involves intensive quantity, qualitative greatness, and the use of estimative reason, knowing your own power, your own ability, your own resources. Regarding the term magnificent, that's a doer of great. Thomas says it is predicated, this term is predicated analogously. The expenditure must be judged great relative to the thing for which it is being made and for the person making it. Notice how the estimative sense, cogitative reason, has to be brought into play. You have to know your powers and your ability. It's vice by defect. Aristotle has a difficult time coming up with the proper term for this. I call it classless, and as well as other terms that I use for its excess, tacky and gaudy. A person who doesn't know how to give with class, and as a result, that tends to do things that are either lacking in proper quality by being too gaudy or tacky. The virtue is taken not according to absolute quantity, Aristotle says, that is dimensive quantity, arithmetic, but according to right reason, that is according to virtual quantity or prudence, much like the virtue of justice will use equality according to right reason, not according to right reason in the sense of prudential activity all of the time, but will also include arithmetical quantity, but Aristotle will make a distinction between the two of them. As far as qualities of magnificent giving go, Aristotle says that the magnificent giver makes great disbursements in a prudent way, expends the right amounts for a great goal, spends great sums cheerfully, promptly, readily, plans how he can achieve the best and most splendid work, not how he can spend as little as possible doing a desired work, and is magnificently generous. While such a person incurs great expense, he produces, gets the maximum of quality and beauty for the expense incurred. This is the type of person we'd say who gets a bang for the buck. The objects of magnificence, that is, what is it that interests the person who wants to do great deeds. St. Thomas starts his discussion about the objects of magnificence by stating that the magnificent person preserves proportion between the money expended and what is received. In other words, as the virtuous mean, prudent expenditures are well proportioned, rightly related, suitable, they are beautiful and harmonious. All virtue consists in unity of proportion between opposites, a privative negation of extremes. It hits the virtual quantum mean between excess and defect, and as a result is beautiful. The prudent man behaves as a proportionate equal, a one, a limit, a leader, a rule, like a leaden rule. St. Thomas gives this example later on in talking about justice, of how Masons would use a leaden rule to fit, because of its flexibility, to fit bricks together or stones together in building a wall out of stone. And as a result, the prudent person resembles this kind of leaden rule through a qualitative balance scale between the too much and too little power in act. The virtue, properly understood, when completed by prudence, is very much like this type of adaptive principle, like a guidance, what today we would consider in an aircraft to be a guidance system that is projected, propelled toward an aim, toward being fixed in getting to a final location. And along the way, there are external pressures, external influences that can throw an activity off course. The action is of the virtuous person results from consent, and as a result of that, there is command, and through choice. The choice, you decide to choose. You command the action. What that command does is it propels the action toward an end. Law functions in this kind of way for St. Thomas. It's not simply a statement. It's a directive in the sense that it shoots something out toward an end. It propels people to act in one way or against acting in another. And in so doing, what virtue acts like is a modulator with respect to surroundings, with respect to the circumstances, so you don't get thrown off course. This is why many people think that moral activity is simply relative, that it does not depend upon any kind of a principle, and this mistakes its nature. I at times talk about the universals that philosophers are interested in as being causal universals. What I mean by that is they're operational principles. They are these guiding systems, these guidance systems toward an end that function throughout the whole course of an action, that incline parts to unify into wholes, so as to execute an action. So virtue keeps us on course. As a result, it's a universal. It's an operational universal, keeping your action on course, so that anything that comes along the way by excess or defect doesn't throw the guidance system off course, and you hit the target. It's like a program that's implanted into an operation, and it's why it's called second nature, so that things that act by nature, if you watch them, with respect to animals, for example, or with respect to trees, when they're set and growing in one way, to try to deviate them from that course is impossible. This internal guidance system, which is virtue or vice, vice leads you off course. Virtue maintains the right course. It heads straight, and it has to adapt. It's self-modulating, self-regulating, self-adapting to the individual situation. So if you try to throw it on course, you can't do it. It comes right back and heads toward the goal. It's like a block that a boxer will make, or somebody in the martial arts. Choice, recall too, is of the actual and the possible, not of the impossible. It presupposes voluntariness. It's right judgment, right appetite. It's ordered toward real, not fictional means. Virtuous choice, prudence, achieves the right balance between the capabilities of the agent and those of what the agent chiefly seeks to effect. It's like a self-adjusting device, mechanism within a habit to keep it on course toward the end in the individual circumstances, so that it involves knowing what is being done. It involves knowing all of the circumstances, what you're doing, what you're doing it to, what you're doing it for, what you're doing it with, how you're doing it, the chief reason what you're doing it for, as well as what you're doing it for. It's the chief reason you're doing it, and how you're doing it, how intensely you're doing it, where, when, and why you're doing it. It's got these 8 circumstances. If you don't know the 8 circumstances in which you're executing an act, you can't know how you're being thrown off course. You can't know whether or not you're acting voluntarily, because, well, you can know you're not acting with complete voluntariness because you don't know all of the factors, as we'd call them today, that impact, that influence the execution of your act. If you don't know the circumstances, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're acting on, and what you're doing it to, what you're doing it with, chiefly why you're doing it, how you're doing it, how intensely you're doing it, where and why you're doing it, then you're missing pieces of the puzzle. You don't know whether or not, strictly speaking, it's possible for you to do what you want to be doing. So virtuous, prudent choice achieves this right balance. It's like an internal balance scale, and it creates perfect and harmonious union through right proportion, right reason. As such, it's beautiful. In executing a particular act, this includes properly qualifying the action with all the right circumstances that are essential parts of a single act. Anybody who has practical knowledge knows what I'm talking about, and knows that what I'm saying is right. Not because I'm saying it, because these people have correctly identified it, and I'm just reporting it. They're ahead of their time, centuries. Who would have thought of this like internal guidance system as a universal? But it corrects every move that you're making. How is it not universal? It's a universal principle in action that has to be modulated in the individual circumstance. In executing the particular act, this includes properly qualifying the action with all the right circumstances that are essential parts of the single act. The circumstances of the act, what I just talked about, those 8 circumstances, are all the parts that you need to perform an act. You need time. You need place. You need instruments. You need a goal. For example, you need to know what you're doing and chiefly why you're doing it. Virtue is a balance of power scale, an internal balance of power scale, enabling opposites to be properly related so as to be able to unite and generate a perfect fit between the opposites and produce perfect action. As a virtue, magnificence involves executing honorable acts, psychologically more beautifying, more spiritually perfecting acts of qualitatively greater goodness, of higher intensive quantity, of doing these most perfectly and most beautifully. Aristotle says the objects of such expenditures are chiefly divine, religious events, and public welfare activities. Secondarily, events related to private persons regarding things that happen once in a lifetime, like I say a son or daughter's wedding. They pursue the common good, and they are not permanent. One time, great events. The magnificent person makes expenditures commensurate with the merit of the work, because the person choosing and what is chosen are extreme differences. The person choosing and what is chosen belonging to the same genus of virtuous activity. Unlike the magnificent person, the classless person, the person extreme to excess, spends lavishly on fools and imprudently, is a show-off, vain, tacky, gaudy. This has 5 traits. To fall short in expenditures, pays late, dwells on spending as little as possible, spends gloomily, reluctantly, painfully. When done, thinks that he or she has spent too much. Aristotle's ability to engage in psychological analysis is unparalleled. It's amazing. He and St. Thomas are just off the charts. According to St. Thomas, as its name suggests, the virtue of magnanimity, which we're going on to, is, as its name suggests, is concerned with great deeds and honors performed by people who think themselves able to do great deeds. The act of a prudent, not a foolish man, who knows power and abilities and acts accordingly. The magnanimous person is like the magnificent person. In fact, magnanimity, greatness of soul, more or less comprises all of the virtues. And is that toward which Aristotle is moving us from being small-souled and barbaric in nature, intemperate and concupiscent, to being great-souled and generous, outgoing, and sociable, so that we can live as citizens and friends within a city. While taken in a wide sense, a temperate person is a person of moderation in small deeds. The magnanimous person, like a beautiful person, displays some greatness of size, being well built, having spiritual heft. This person, as I've said, knows his or her powers and abilities and acts accordingly. The vice by excess of magnanimity is a deflated ego. An inflated ego. This person thinks too much of himself or herself. Is conceited, pompous. The vice by defect is being pusillanimous, being small soul, lacking in initiative, lacking in drive, having no enterprise to do great deeds. This person thinks too little of himself or herself. Once again, the estimative sense. You don't sense your powers and abilities properly. The object that concerns the magnanimous person is the greatest of all external goods. And it's a perfecting, a beautifying quality of attached to other virtues. When it accompanies other virtues, it's a special virtue. It's a virtue considered in and of itself with respect to expenditures, but it can also accompany other virtues like courage, where the person strives for great deeds and courageous actions. Because prudence generates magnanimity, Aristotle reasons that no evil person can be magnanimous. Magnanimity is a special virtue, beautifying, perfecting other virtues. It's like the finishing touches, the trim on a house. It's difficult to achieve because it presupposes having great virtue. As far as acts of magnanimity are concerned, Aristotle and St. Thomas say the magnanimous person does not expose himself to dangers for trifling matters, is not a lover of danger, does not undergo danger for trifling or insignificant reasons, braves great dangers for great goods, like religion, public welfare, and justice, braves them ardently, preferring death to dishonor. The 5 properties of the magnanimous person are being proficient in doing good for others, being hesitant to accept favors from others, and if the magnanimous person accepts benefits, he does so in a way that causes anxiety to return great ones, great gifts. This person cheerfully confers but reluctantly receives benefits, cheerfully listens to benefits he has bestowed, but doesn't take pleasure in listening to benefits bestowed on him, doesn't incline to show himself in need of anything, but promptly inclines to minister to the needs of others. Other traits of the magnanimous man include displaying honor and dignity to men of dignity and wealth, not showing off superiority to other men, and because the virtuous man knows self-worth among superiors, has no need to show off among inferiors, and considers himself to be equal to people that are called superiors. Next, Aristotle identifies 2 traits of the magnanimous person related to the intellect and the appetites. He says this person is truthful, open, transparent about who his friends and enemies are. He has no fear of revealing this. He cares more about the truth than the opinion of others. Is transparent in speech and behavior, does not lie, but likes to joke to please some people, not everyone. Appetitively, he finds company of a few friends pleasant, honorable friends. He eschews flatterers. It doesn't seek to become popular. Does not try to please everyone. Isn't a gossip. Is quick to express admiration for others. Busies his life with internal goods, not many external goods. Rarely speaks about other people and himself. Is too busy being concerned about God and the common good, and does not hold a grudge. He's not chiefly interested in having many external or useful goods. He prefers honorable and unfruitful, profitless, more speculative intellectual goods because he's self-sufficient. In bodily movement, this person is deliberate and slow, with voice is solemn, speech measured. He's not contentious because he does not hold external goods of value. So this person is not going to be the type of person who engages in friendships for the the purpose of pleasure, or of utility, of using somebody. This is the type of person who's going to be seeking friendships that are chiefly perfections of the soul. Regarding vices opposed to magnanimity, which St. Thomas takes up in Lesson 11, according to Aristotle, the vice, that is in virtual quantity greatness, opposed to magnanimity by defect, is being small-souled. In excess, it's being conceited. By underestimating, and once again estimation, the estimative sense is engaged here, the small-souled person deprives himself of greater goods he deserves by not trying to work to get them. Becomes satisfied with lesser goods that inclines to make a person lazy, shrinks away from performing virtuous acts and great deeds and studying speculative science, because this expands your internal liberty, and as a result, your awareness of political activities and metaphysical types of goods and so forth. This person is more concerned with mechanical operations and practical activities on a small scale even. Unlike the small-souled man who is stupid and ignorant of his ability, the conceited person attempts great honorable deeds totally beyond this person's ability, thereby publicly embarrassing himself. Okay, and let's see. He is not chiefly interested in, I talked about that, not chiefly interested in having many friends. Okay, getting lost on my pages here. Because he thinks too much of himself, the small-souled person externally practices the vice of external glorification, conceit, external signs of pomposity in dress, walking, action, and speech. Of the two vices, Aristotle says that of being small-souled is more opposed to magnanimity because the natural inclination of virtue is to restrain man's inclination to evil. Human nature more strongly inclines us to do good, virtuous deeds than to avoid evil. Omitting the practice of virtuous deeds is worse than failing to attempt them. It makes us less virtuous because we become virtuous by attempting difficult deeds. And in this way, makes us less human, being small-souled. Thank you very much for your attention. That ends part 1. We'd just finished discussing vices related to magnanimity, of vices like being conceited, thinking too much of yourself, and being small-souled, not thinking as much as you should about yourself. In this lesson 12, St. Thomas is going to consider virtues concerned with ordinary honors, or the virtue concerned with ordinary honors, with small honors. He says it lacks a name. It doesn't have a name like great-souled or small-souled. You might take something in between and call it being rightly souled. The virtue concerned with rightly desiring small honors is the virtue he's talking about. It conforms to prudence in its nature, and it strives to be honored rightly under all circumstances in the right way regarding the right deeds. Doesn't want too much or too little honor. The vice concerns wanting the wrong honors, or the right honors in the wrong way, or going to excess and wanting honors imprudently. In lesson 13, Aristotle and St. Thomas don't talk much about this particular vice. Just go and mention that there is such a vice and what its nature is. Lesson 13 extends this this treatment, this consideration, once again toward sociability, discussing actions related to external goods and proper behavior that encourage us to be sociable human beings, to get along with other people, to live together with them, which is the chief concern for Aristotle and the ancient Greeks in this study of ethics, at least by the time of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. That's what appears to have been fixed in the Greek psyche at least of the leading philosophers. He starts to talk about this virtue of meekness, or being calmly inclined, and its opposed vices. Having considered virtues dealing with the external goods of riches and honors, St. Thomas says Aristotle next considers virtues and vices dealing with external goods that provoke anger. And this is reasonable, once again, step by step, bringing in the essential elements, enabling us to be sociable with other human beings, because this brings us toward the proper emotional condition that's needed for us to be just. If we can't get angry, recall that anger is in a natural condition of the irascible appetite, and it's in relationship to the estimated power, the particular reason, cogitative reason, being aware of this, estimating that a person has been treated with disrespect or unjustly, that anger is generated. So it's reasonable to treat this before treating. It's a necessary process, a necessary procedure, a necessary order to follow before treating justice. He says that he considers these the virtues and vices dealing with external goods that provoke anger, and including mildness or calm, being calmly inclined, which is a mean for excess and defect of anger. This mean has no name, like being great-souled, or extreme. It has no name for the extreme, which is a kind of sheepishness, I would call it. But we might call it being even-tempered or cool-tempered. The extreme by excess he calls irascibility, which we would generally call being hot-tempered. The calmly inclined person gets angry prudently, at the right acts, in the right way, under the right circumstances. Of the two vices, sheepishness is worse. For three reasons, Aristotle refutes the Stoic claim that all anger is blameworthy, because at times getting angry conforms with prudence, is a species of wisdom, and so it can't be blameworthy. It would have to be praiseworthy. At times, and this is crucial to note, anger aids justice to punish actions that should be punished by stirring up or disturbing reason to help engage its judgment. Only a sheepish man tolerates being treated like a doormat. As St. Thomas, in a certain way close to that, says. Examining the vice of hot-temperedness, Aristotle and St. Thomas say that such people are able to go to excess in all circumstances, but these excesses cannot exist in one person simultaneously. Today we'd call such a person someone who bounces off the walls. You cannot get angry at everything in excess on a constant basis. The same is true of evil considered as such. This would be self-consuming, and people who engaged in it would not live long. Next, Aristotle says that three species of hot-temperedness exist, or irascibility. Being too angry with the wrong people about wrong issues. But he says this doesn't last long. It dissipates quickly. It tends to be good for the heart and good for health. And the body chemistry of certain people, some people, appears to incline them to behave this way. It tends to be better. They tend to be better off for it. The second species of hot-temperedness he calls being sullen or brutish. It tends to last too long. A person broods over anger and can become melancholy. It's unhealthy for a person to do this. It makes such people difficult to live with, and only punishment inclines this kind of anger to subside. Punishment of the people that this person is seeking revenge against. And then the morose, which is even worse type of hot-temperedness, being angry at the wrong thing in the wrong way for too long. The length of anger, he says, is caused by the length of time involved getting revenge, and is only fixed by being able to get revenge. And as this is going on, the longer it occurs, the more the person who's morose inclines to hide the anger. The excess of anger, he says, is more opposed to even-temperedness than is sheepishness, because by nature human beings incline toward being calm, not sheepish, unless injured, and excessively angry people inclined to be antisocial. As a result, the sheepish person at least is able to get along with people, but still, it's not a good state, a proper state to be in emotionally, as Aristotle would maintain. Finally, Aristotle concludes that precisely determining with certainty at what actions, in what way we should be angry is not easy. We should not greatly blame the person who departs from the mean too much or too little in great or small matters. At times we praise both for so doing. Determining precisely how much deviation from the mean is praiseworthy is difficult. Evident is that the prudent man is praiseworthy, excess and defect is blameworthy, less so if they are slight, more so if they are great, and most so if they are most great. Recall how I said before that virtue, as Aristotle understands it, is a measuring principle that has a universal application. It's the universal norm. It's the universal in the area of practical activity related to moral behavior. It's not the universal of the logician. It's very much like having a mechanism within you that in the individual circumstances kicks on autopilot, which kicks on gyros in a plane and stabilizes its movement, because virtue relates to performing actions, choosing to act. A person who is virtuous is being moved to act, is being commanded to act, and to maintain straight direction so you don't deviate along the way. And in relationship to excess and defect, to external movements, the circumstances of the act are all of the parts of the act that have to be harmoniously unified, and keep as much as possible headed in the same direction toward the goal of healthy operation, of securing in the individual circumstance the real over the non-real good, the greater over the less good. That's the sense in which the ethics, morality, has moral principles, or what people sometimes call values, which they don't tend to comprehend when they use the terms in general. That's the moral universal, that stabilizing principle of operation, what I call often the causal universal, meaning it's the operational universal. As Aristotle moves closer to his discussion of justice in Book 5 of the Nicomachean Ethics, in the last 4 chapters of the Nicomachean Ethics, starting with what St. Thomas is Lecture 14, he starts to talk about social qualities like being pleasant toward other people, amiability, affability, as St. Thomas translates it. He starts to discuss external actions chiefly concerned with external personal relations that impact on social life, that impact on communication between human beings, among human beings, by means of which we are able to get along with other people, like sociability, personal relations. Basically, he's starting to talk about what we would today call personal relations more directly. Being pleasant, telling the truth, being able to laugh, and also having a sense of shame. According to St. Thomas, does this in a couple of ways. He talks about this quality of affability regarding serious, or what we might call work-related and community work-related personal relations, and other that are less serious, leisure-related relations that tend to involve humor. He starts his study of personal relations as a series of a serious nature by studying the social virtue of just being pleasant, being able to get along. Its vice by excess is obsequiousness, and by defect is that of the contrarian or the disagreeable person. Considering the vice of disagreeableness first, St. Thomas says that in the area of human communication and conversation, in which human beings naturally inclined to associate as companions, some human beings go to excess in the use of words and deeds by straining at all costs to please and not to offend other people. They praise everything others do to make others like them, never contradicting anyone out of fear of causing pain or sadness or offense. They want to engage in pleasant. They consider the friendship a kind of pleasant activity, pleasing activity. Other people, notice how the idea of friendship is being built up in the minds of people who engage in these kinds of qualities of action. Other people, contrary to the obsequious, are contrarians, disagreeable people who incline to contradict everything other people say, to criticize everything they say and do. They emphasize anything that will make life miserable for others. They don't tend to be able to get along with anyone, not even with themselves. Aristotle continues that the virtuous mean regarding these extremes is rightly accepts and praises what other people rightly say and do, and rightly rejects and blames whatever people wrongly say and do. St. Thomas says Aristotle names this mean from likeness to friendship, and he calls it amiability. According to St. Thomas, Aristotle does this because in external act, this habit closely resembles friendship. The person disposed by this habit behaves toward others in a way that fosters agreeable association, in a way resembling honorable friendship, a friendship moderated by prudence, loving those with whom we live, going beyond utility, the friendship for utility or friendship just based on pleasure. Thomas claims that this virtue differs from friendship because it does not manifest the sense emotion of love and the will's act of affection that accompanies friendship. The amiable person treats everyone, strangers and acquaintances, the same. As a result of a habit of being amiable and pleasant. and not being a sycophant, obsequious, or quarrelsome, contentious. He resembles the liberal giver who donates chiefly because he's a free spender, but not because he chiefly loves a person. This virtue does not extend to all acts. It concerns getting along, basically, with other people from the standpoint of just being sociable by nature. Aristotle enumerates 5 properties of amiability taken from the way amiable people communicate. Ethics, chiefly, dealing with personal relationships, deals with communications arts. That's what it's all about. The amiable person communicates fittingly, proportionately, aims at living together without offense, with pleasure. Sometimes refuses to give pleasure to another, however, and chooses to give another pain. This can happen in 2 ways, according to St. Thomas. When a person speaks disrespectfully to the amiable person, and a person he lives with or she lives with does something disgraceful which the amiable person will incline to correct. The amiable person respects social distinctions and talks accordingly. As I think, from what I recall, St. Thomas, I don't know whether I have it word for word, it says the virtuous man does not take misdeeds lying down. He chiefly strives, and that's likely extending the translation. He chiefly strives to give pleasure, avoid offending, but will offend at times if he supports future living together, requires that he do so. Beyond this way of fittingly communicate by communicating with pleasure, since the 2 chief ways that we tend to communicate with each other are in terms of knowledge and in terms of appetite, and we're dealing with trying to be pleasing, we go on to discuss veracity, being truthful. Because Aristotle says that, and this is why Aristotle just touched on this characteristic of the amiable person, because Aristotle says that examining individual virtues as we research this study is useful to moral science. He adds that by so doing, we come to understand that all virtues are medium states related to particular habits. Once again, retaining that kind of equilibrium within the context of the circumstances, all of those different activities that surround the performance of an action, and include who's doing something, or what is that person doing to what, for what reason, with what means, how, with what intensity, at what time, at what place, what are the circumstances. All of these are parts that construct the act in its singular nature. This is useful to moral science, he says, because by so doing, we come to understand that all virtues are median states related to particular habits. He adds that this knowledge of particulars completes moral science. You don't have the complete act if you don't know all of the circumstances, and you can't take them all into consideration to relate them to your power to act and bring them about the way you want them to bring them about. Considering veracity as far as truth-telling in words and deeds further extends moral science and external acts, contributing to making us more or less sociable. Regarding truth-telling, Aristotle identifies the vice of excess as boasting. The boaster pretends to have praiseworthy qualities, powers, and abilities, and a kind of intensive quantitative greatness, as I would call it. He doesn't have it all, or does not have as greatly as he claims to have. The vice by defect is dissembling, claiming to be less powerful, less knowledgeable than a person is. The virtuous mean is being rightly self-admirable, being rightly self-expressive as to what your actual abilities are, being genuine or real in word and deed, being, as we'd say today, transparent. These three habits can relate to a means to an end, or to an end, just considered as such. Taking pleasure in doing what, in being, that is, what you are. Because words are signs of what is, St. Thomas says, and we use signs chiefly to represent things as they are, so we don't get hurt, for example, and we become benefited. St. Thomas maintains that liars are vicious and evil because their actions cause disorder in human relations by causing disorder in human communications, and the net effect of that, he doesn't say, but at least here, but they tend to destroy language. St. Thomas adds that the man who speaks the truth possesses the mean because truth signifies a thing as it is. He claims the truth consists in an equality that is a mean between the great and the small. That's why he calls it an adequatio, meaning it's a proportion between too much and too little. It's the virtual quantum mean, the proportionate mean between excess and defect related to what is. The truthful man about whom Aristotle speaks is the person habitually inclined to tell the truth in everyday conversation, not the person coerced under oath. This truthful person Aristotle is talking about here is the person who loves telling the truth as such and aims to live affably with others through love of truth. This person hates a lie, tends to it anyway, considers it essentially shameful, and inclines toward understatement, not overstatement or excess. Considering the boaster, Aristotle says sometimes he boasts for pleasure, he gets out of it, not for evil, because he wants honor and glory, or just for the good, or honor and glory often, that the good, honor and glory often secure. And he says that this type of boasting, the second and the third, wanting glory and honor and doing it because it often secures glory and honor, he says those are bad. Those are types of boasting that that are not harmless and should be avoided. What people tend to boast about, he says, is related to the three types of friendships. Some boast about everything for enjoyment. Some boast about things worthy of praise and honor because they want praise and honor. They seek friendships. Not only that, they want to give them. They seek friendships based on praise and honor. And the things in which we find pleasure are another thing about which people will boast. The examples of people who boast, he says, are people who want to use others also. Aside from those who boast for pleasure, some boast for honor, some boast for utility, purposes of utility. He includes among these people people who are physicians, and people who are diviners, and people who claim to be wise. People who are pretending to be professionals with some sort of esoteric knowledge, and are actually dissemblers in a way. Such dissemblers practice their vice sometimes, and he even applies this to Socrates, for a good purpose, to flee from vanity. Others do it as a way of boasting. He refers to Spartan dress, like some people want to appear tougher than they are, and some so as neither to affirm or deny any sorts of deeds about themselves, but to be pleasing. They dressed for simply to to please other people. Because he is more vicious, St. Thomas says the boaster is more opposed to the truthful person. Lesson 16 considers the communication of amusement and laughter. That's similar to the being affable, the virtue of affability. And this relates to virtues of a non-serious but a relaxing nature, related to relaxational activities or leisure activities. St. Thomas starts by saying that amusement and laughter are needed, are useful for us to rest from bodily and mental work, and they incline to involve listening and talking. Because human beings are rational by nature, and this is the chief means through which we engage in rationality in a social way. It involves listening and talking about proper things, pleasant things, in the proper way, in a pleasant way. We call people with this virtue often witty. The extreme by excess, St. Thomas calls a buffoon, aims at getting a laugh from everyone. And also inclines to make fun of everybody. The defect is a boor. The excess, the buffoon, also is sometimes called a mocker. Someone who, in the extreme, aims at shaming another. The boor is somebody who just doesn't tend to like people. Is conversationally useless and tends to hate jest. The witty person tells jokes, according to Aristotle, that are tactful, decent, like those of a liberal, not a slavish soul, not gross, as we'd say today, jests in a cultural way, is not obscene, and tends not to offend but to please. At times, this person will reproach, like the affable person would, to correct someone. Aristotle concludes by saying that two species of communication exist in words and works. One aims at truthfulness in words and deeds, veracity, and one aims at expressing emotion, expressing pleasure in work-related or serious matters, amiability, and in amusement, in leisure related matters. Getting close to the end of this book, in lesson 17, St. Thomas says, having finished discussing the qualitative means, what I call the intensive quantum means regarding abilities to act, virtues, he examines a qualitative mean that is an emotion, not a habit, shame. Very often people think that shame is a virtue. St. Thomas and Aristotle maintain it's not. Some celebrate it as if it's the greatest of virtues, in fact. They don't say that, but they don't say that here. I think they would agree with that. They say that shame consists in a fear of disgrace, and that indicates its social nature. Now, this makes it reasonable, once again, as an emotion to present here and focus attention on, because the unjust person tends to do shameful action. A person who has no sense of shame has no conscience, has no ability to have a sense of higher goods. And to fear and to express an emotion of that indicates a sadness at being out of touch with reality, or choosing worse over greater goods. Like frightened people, he says, shamed people tend to blush. And then they go into an explanation of why this is the case. At least St. Thomas does in detail. That terrified people, he says, turn pale because of a fear of death. There's also, related to shame, this fear of confusion which can be created in a situation which a person will also be experience shame about. And shame relates to an emotion. It's very similar to embarrassment, but St. Thomas has already distinguished between these two, telling us that shame deals with activities that we are sad about having done in the past and don't want publicized, whereas we're embarrassed at present weaknesses that are publicly displayed. So the emotions, recall, are movements of the sensory appetite to move bodily organs. And hence they employ heat and cold and blood flow to influence the quality of bodily actions. Emotions essentially involve organic change, hence we judge their existence by observing, by looking for bodily changes. A person who's ashamed feels weakness. A person who's embarrassed feels weakness. And socially weak. And so as a result, the blood flow tends to go out. The person in fear, St. Thomas says, the blood flow, the heat tends to come back to the center of the body, the life source, which is the heart. He remarks that terrified people turn pale, while shamed people blush. And this is because of what he calls the bodily spirit and the humors, which he means by, he put today probably, an equilibrium in body chemistry that causes a rush of the blood and the heat to the place that feels the need. Intense fear of death causes the life principle to rush toward life's chief organic principle, the heart, drawing the blood and the heat from the bodily extremities to protect the heart. Because shame causes a man to experience loss of external good, honor, and its presence of a threatening evil and confusion. The spirit, the humors rush toward the body's surface, somewhat like anger, to be prepared to protect yourself in a social way. Because virtuous people do not experience shame, Aristotle and St. Thomas says shame cannot be a virtue. A very important thing to note about the nature of shame and how it can be useful for educational purposes, but to think that it is a virtue considered in and of itself is a great mistake, as not only Aristotle but Plato and Socrates pointed out. Similarly, the continence, similar to shame, Aristotle talks about continence not being a virtue because continent men and women experience evil, vehement desires. They just don't succumb to them. While not a virtue, for two reasons Aristotle says shame is becoming to youth. It's somewhat beautiful. It's proportionate to them. Because intense desires beset youth, they tend to live according to their emotions and commit many vices. Shame, an effect of conscience, restrains youth. It's a kind of natural teacher through fear of disgrace and dishonor to incline them to listen to the cogitative reason over the concupiscible appetite. And can be a good moral and educational principle when rightly used. Shame is unbecoming the elderly, however, according to Aristotle, because, and St. Thomas in agreeing with him, it does not become virtuous people. Virtue makes its possessor and the possessor's works good, and the elderly should be virtuous, which ends part 2 of video lecture 10, which I hope you enjoyed. It's filled with all sorts of insights about human psychology and the nature of moral behavior.